Hello, hello. Anybody even say hi to everyone? Say hi. Oh my goodness. Say hi, everyone. All right, put in the chat where you guys are zooming from. See who we have representing today. Central Mass. I was born in Western Mass. Yeah, Nico's super cute. Illinois, Kansas, Louisiana. Bunch of folks have been reaching out from Louisiana lately. Austin, Florida, Arizona, Johnstown, PA. On the Cape. Yes. P-Town. Colorado, Maine, St. Pete. Oh, that's you. Jen. DMV. I learned that that wasn't just the car place recently. Surely. That's DC, Maryland, Virginia. I didn't realize that. Um, yeah, exactly. All right, so we'll let folks keep strolling in before we get started. Um, And if you're joining, just put where you are zooming in from. All right. So typically I have slides, and today's not going to be that kind of day. But we're also going to talk about something I wasn't anticipating talking about that I am not fully an expert on, but that needs to be discussed. Very, very, very dear friend of mine for almost 20 years had his husband detained by ICE, and he's in one of the worst detention centers in the country called Moshannon. Someone died there last month. They have like 800 people to a room. Just Google Moshannon. Gary, it's Jason Javi's husband, was detained. So we're going to talk about ICE and not immigration. So I'm not an expert on immigration per se, but just ICE protection. Jason's husband works for a really well-known restaurant group and does design for them. And I've offered to do, which I did for other restaurants who reached out to me post-election. I offered to do an ICE workshop for all of their employees, and restaurants tend to be undocumented. And one of the number one things that we do for folks is make sure that they have a durable power of attorney. Like, who knew that estate planning would also be the number one sort of impenetrable, line of defense with immigration, ICE, deportation, but having someone who's able to work, um, live for you as you financially and legally and do all the things that you could do in case you're detained indefinitely. Miranda, someone that we work with, knows someone who is detained for 2 months, fully documented, right? So there's no rhyme or reason, but I'll share my screen. Henry did have a final deportation order from when he was 17. He had it upon arrival because of a weird immigration glitch, and they took a commercial flight. American Airlines, all of the airlines are reporting passengers to ICE directly. So when he scanned his boarding card, it beeped oddly. It made a completely different beep, and then 20 people just came out of nowhere. They were anticipating and expecting it. So to choose to travel, especially if you're undocumented or have any type of odd visa issue, I'd recommend not doing so for the indefinite future. But again, you could be detained being totally documented, right? So, but really looking at the airlines you book through, Expedia, Travelocity, all of those companies have admitted that they are complying with subpoenas to give their passenger information. They were on American Airlines. I looked it up and they too are complying. So just being careful about where you're booking as well. Um, and they were on their way to see the Eagles play the Kansas City Chiefs. So I forget who that actress was, that her acceptance speech was, um, go Eagles, fuck ICE, and free Palestine. Well, there you go. So there's Jason on the right, Henry on the left. Jason's a lawyer, criminal defense attorney. It really got him through being cool and collected, and having people yell and handcuffs and all of the things really helped. Um, so let me. All right, so what can we do? And so I know two very well-known nationwide immigration attorneys, and so I've spoken to them this morning, and it is only going to get worse. So as far as the statistics go, it's been on the rise all year, but August last month had the most arrests in 2025 at 32,363. Divide that by 30, that's more than 1,000 people a day. So, and it's only going to get worse. And that's what they're expecting. Um, and 70, including Henry, 70.8% of them have zero criminal record. 7 out of 10, 70% of these folks have zero criminal record. So what can you do? And what can you tell folks to do if you know someone who could be impacted? The number one, durable power of attorney. Having someone, and this durable power of attorney, you will also call them the captain, if you will, because separate from having this legal form, then being able to pay your mortgage and do all of the things, they're also going to be sort of the captain of this network that folks need to create. Um, so putting everything on auto pay, right? So one of the biggest things that we're seeing is people are detained, they come out 9 months later, they're foreclosed upon, their lease is terminated, life as they know it stopped, right? The durable power of attorney would be able to pay these things for you, contact the bank, all of the things, but they usually want to talk to the principal even if the power of attorney exists. So if you can't do that, having it, doing all of this in advance is key, and to the extent possible, having things on auto pay. Authorized user access, emergency cash, and a password manager. So having LastPass, OnePass, some sort of password manager, only the captain knows your master pass, and then they can get into everything and be you. If you have children or you care for a parent, making sure that you give temporary caregiver authority to someone. So you make it effective immediately upon signing it, but it's temporary upon you being able to revoke it whenever you want. Okay, because you don't know, once you're detained, you have no due process, right? So this happened Friday morning in the airport, and Jason, we don't know when we'll hear anything, right? So there's no phone call, there's no let me call my lawyer, there's no, so being able, having these documents already in effect so the person can act immediately is key. And if you have a pet, again, Nico, have a pet plan. On top of your children and or elderly parents, make sure you have a pet plan. If you take any medication, making sure that you have those listed on a laminated card, right? If you're diabetic, if you're this, if you're that, like making sure that on your person you have a medication card that talks about your conditions, your allergies, prescriptions, all of the things. Work, school, landlord, right? All of the sort of admin areas that would be impacted if all of a sudden you disappeared Friday morning, right? Henry has a job and he disappeared Friday morning. He has a husband and, so someone who is able to speak on his behalf, but ultimately, if you just disappear on Friday morning, you're going to get fired, right? Like having something in place. So template messages already written out that your captain then sends. So you've already written it, and a landlord script, same letter, a landlord script that says rent will continue to be paid, right? I won't be here for a while, but don't worry, rent will continue to be paid. School and daycare, if that's needed, have your caregiver on file with them. So the next day at drop off or pickup, there's no questions or concerns. Your car, your phone, and any and all devices, right? So I live in Philadelphia, the land of 2-hour parking, right? So you're parked, and then all of a sudden you're detained Friday morning, and ticket, boot, towed, right? So being impound proof and having a signed letter of authorization, again, to your captain. So the captain is your durable power of attorney, but your captain is really the hub, if you will, of all of these different things to be able to retrieve your car if it gets impounded, plus a state, every state, the DMV, Shirley, every state's DMV also has a vehicle power of attorney. Your everyday standard DPOA that I give you won't, not that it won't work, but what sucks about powers of attorney is that is the first line that you need in order to get approval from a certain institution. So if you have a durable power of attorney from me, and then you go to give it to Chase Bank or the DMV, then they're going to say, I want you to now fill out this form. You've gotten over hurdle number one. You wouldn't even get this form if you weren't a power of attorney, but you are. So now fill out our form where you give your blood and firstborn and all of the things. So it's like a 6 to 8 week process once you get an estate planning DPOA to actually get listed with a bank and all of the things. So getting the document is step one, and then actually with all of the institutions that matter, making it in effect. Now Chase views you as the power of attorney. Phone plan. So add your captain as an authorized user with your account PIN, right? If you've ever tried to call AT&T for anyone else from a different phone number, nightmare, hours and hours and hours. Okay, so having them already authorized as a user with your 4 digits, 6 digit, whatever PIN. Your detention packet, if you will, is what we call it, and having 2 detention packets in 2 places. Okay, so on you at all times is in the case of detention. So in the case of detention, and then you have the sheet with your full legal name, your A number, which if you're in the immigration system, you'll have an A number, your DOB, your lawyer's phone number, contact information, all of the things. The captain's contact, your meds list. That 1 pager has everything, and it's on you. Copy of your ID, your work permit, marriage or birth certificate, and any immigration proof of where you are in the process, what you've already achieved, additional hearings that are coming up, whatever it is. Your signed POAs, healthcare documents, caregiver forms, your lease, your deed, mortgage information, anything like that. The ICE privacy waiver. So also something you get off the government website, but it's an ICE privacy waiver allowing, again, for this information to be shared. And then a simple communication trait. Okay, so again, your captain is your number one. You send a code word. So only you and the captain know this code word. You text them that word. They know it's real, it's happening. That person then starts the comms tree. They tell 3 people, every person tells 3 people, and then everybody knows. Right now, Jason is still, while he's on KYW and NPR and doing all these things, he's having to tell everybody. Right? And so if he just got to tell one person who then told 3, and then everyone would then know. So the 3-person cascade. What does the captain do in the first 24 to 72 hours? So check all the nearby facilities, right? So we don't know necessarily where the person's going to be detained, but we have the A number. We have, even right now, we know where he is, but we don't have any additional information. But so for a lot of folks who don't have a lawyer as a husband, you wouldn't even have the information that we currently have on Henry. Okay, so it's called an ODLS and nearby facilities, and you call locator.ice.gov. And then with all of the information, then you can find what detention center. Henry's 4 hours away from where he was detained. Jason was able to find out where. So if there is an existing court case, you are in the midst of something, then you can check, it's called EOIR status. And then the captain would notify the lawyer, but if someone is actively on a docket, then his detainment would be, Henry was not, but for folks who are, and again, I don't do immigration, so all of these are just letters that I'm reading to you, but it's important. And then If they go to another state, a bond would have to be set. So in this case, Pennsylvania, but immigration is federal. So you don't have to go necessarily somewhere, be detained somewhere in your state. So then you can, if a bond is set for the person, you can then pay the bond through C bonds, CE, capital BONDS, and then arrange for pickup. And then the captain would trigger any and all auto pays. If they weren't on auto pay because the captain has your password, now they know because not everyone is just flush with cash that auto pay is an easy thing, right? And so you don't necessarily want to go on auto pay right from the outset. But when this happens, then this would be the trigger point to turn on the auto pay. Send the employer and landlord letters. If you have an active court case, yeah, I mean immigration, if you're in an immigration process. And then move kids, elders, and pets per the plan. And then document everything, including any officer names, any information that you got from the detainment. All right, so then I have, and I'll include this, I'll give this to Jen to email out, but I was able to Google and put together some of these template letters that folks need to create. The employer letter, the landlord letter, car release letter, although you will need the DMV POA. They're not just going to take this letter, and pet care authorization. So at the end of the day, if you were to Google what to do with ICE, all of the information that you're going to get's BS. It doesn't matter anymore. The Know Your Rights card from the ACLU isn't going to help you. I want to speak to my lawyer, or I'm not. It's just we're so far beyond due process at this point that the showing your ACLU I know my rights card, they're not even in proper. They're in plain clothes, which is also illegal. Half of these raids they're just doing in plain clothes, and so just really, I mean, if it's only we're at 1,000 people a day, in excess of 1,000 people per day being detained, and they think it's only going to get much worse. It's important that anyone have this information. Okay. All right. So kind of Debbie Downer, but any questions? So we'll segue. Very harsh transition, but raise your hand if you have a question just about what we talked about, knowing I'm not an immigration attorney, to help the transition.
There's a question in the chat from Haley that I think is a good one.
Okay. Mm-mm-mm. I know this is in the context of ICE raids, but with the threat that has been long looming of extreme surveillance, 100%. Yep. Everyone can read this. I'm assuming this is just as relevant for folks who could be at risk for arrest for being outspoken. Yes. So I am, and actually, I might as well talk about this because it's related. I have been getting an influx of phone calls from LGBTQ folks. So far, gay men, cis men, and trans folks. No lesbian couples have reached out, but where in travel overseas and then coming home, doesn't matter where you go. You could be going to Russia. That's not the problem anymore. It's not the homophobic place you're going to. It's upon return, trying to get back into the United States, dealing with American Custom Border Patrol. Okay. So you go wherever you go, could be Switzerland, the nicest of all places, could be Moscow. You come back, and at Border Patrol, folks are being detained. You can be detained for up to 6 hours for no reason. Okay. And so there's been a big influx of folks reaching out to me saying, I was detained for no reason. Can I sue? What can I do? No, you can't sue. There's absolutely nothing you can do as far as what happened. There are things you can do. So to Haley's point, when shit's on fire is not the time to get the go bag ready. Now is the time to get the go bag ready. Whatever your go bag looks like in general in life, not with travel. We'll talk about travel, but just in general with where this country's going, right? And it may be a different state, it may be a different country, it may be a different town, whatever it is for you. But if you don't feel safe where you are, the two things that I say, and this requires privilege, So not everybody can do this, but the two things that if you can control these two things will go a long way to making your life easier in the next couple of decades, because I don't see this going away with the next election, is controlling where you work, who you work for, where you work, and where you live. Right? Now that requires privilege. You can't just up and necessarily change jobs. And if you live in, a rural red state, you can't necessarily just up and leave. But those two things are where we spend 2/3 of our life. Right? I have a lot of companies reaching out to me to speak to their Pride employee resource groups. They have zero budget anymore. It's all been cut due to DEI. And the C-level executives are coming together with their own money to pay a speaker fee. My speaker fee used to be between 5 and 10,000. Now I'll do it for free. And I don't need you to give me your actual money from your pocket because you want your employees to have this information. I will do it for free. And so you have large corporations that are still reaching out despite them potentially being impacted to help their employees get information. And so those types of places, those LGBTQ folks feel obviously very seen, very taken care of, very right, as opposed to a company that is cutting DEI at every chance. And so where you work, and then obviously where you live for all of the obvious reasons, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean, I was talking to someone yesterday from Texas, and they're like, well, Washington's not too great. And I'm like, well, Pennsylvania is a red state. We're technically a red state, but I live in Philadelphia, right? So Philadelphia has all of it's HRC's #1 rated city in the country, tied 8 ways with the Portlands, the Seattles, the New Yorks, the San Frans of the world. It has every protection you could imagine. So you have the federal government, then you have the state in which you live, but then the municipality or the city in which you live in can give you even more protections. It's just the city can't tell the state what to do. The state can't tell the federal government what to do, but you can get more expansive as you go down. Right? So even in Pennsylvania, we have employment discrimination now federally for a little bit. That will absolutely go away. Bostock v. Clinton. And we'll talk about that case another day. But in Pennsylvania, before Bostock, there are 67 municipalities in Pennsylvania, and only 30 some odd had employment discrimination protections. So if someone called and said I was fired for being gay, the first question I'd ask is, where do you live? Because if then you were in one of the counties that gave the protection, I could help. If you were 5 minutes away in another county or municipality, then no. So you don't necessarily have to leave a red state per se, but just literally the city, town, what have you that you live. So things that I'm recommending folks do while traveling to make it safer. Don't go up together. Every single couple that has called me that this has happened to has walked up together. Okay, so you're asking for the question to be asked of you. What's your relationship? Why are you traveling together? Are you brothers? No, that's my husband. Right? And so, and if you share the same last name of all of the couples that reached out, a couple shared the same last name, most did not, right? So you have completely two last names. You have Davis and McBride, but you're going up together. Why? At least if it's both Williams, maybe I think you're brothers, right? And then one of them had a black child, and then they were detained, separated, and they're like, who's that girl? Our daughter. Why is she black? What do you mean, why is she black? Like, right? So have one person walk up with the child, the other person walk up separately. There's just no point in trying to make a point, right? Like, I know some people feel like, screw that, we're walking up together, we're married. Well, just know that it adds, a layer of potential risk. Second thing is I am writing letters for folks, pro bono, just complimentary, but writing started with, after the election, in particular, trans folks, and now it has expanded to LGBTQ folks generally. but a letter saying, and I don't know if this would actually, and why I'm not charging for it is I don't know if it'll actually help, because again, you don't have due process. But I got it from the idea came to me because of the 70s and 80s during Stonewall and other riots, and when any type of protest really, where folks knew they were probably going to get arrested. Instead of just having your criminal defense attorneys card on you, folks started going above and beyond and already paying the retainer and then having a letter on them saying, I am presently retained by so and so.
There's blood, so.
Like, I have a lawyer right now. So there's like a lawyer in the room, if you will. Right. So I write these letters. I spoke to someone this morning. They leave on the 25th. I'm going to write a letter for them. And it just says, I, Angela Giampolo, have been retained, right? Just Venmo me $1. It is what it is. Like I can say I'm retaining pro bono. That money does not have to exchange. I have been retained for the purposes of travel, of Stacy's travel from Kentucky to Reykjavik on Delta Flight 1741, arriving at departing Reykjavik on October 1st, returning Delta Flight 1722, arrival time 8:29. For the purposes of that travel, should there be any issues with this travel, I am to be called. So far, 2 people have had experience with the letter out of everyone that I've given it to. One, both trans. One, the woman was sitting there reading the letter and she was all mad about it and she was huffing and puffing and you could tell that she didn't quite know whether this letter meant anything either. But she also wasn't sure she wanted to open Pandora's box. And so she finally, just like after maybe 10, 15 seconds, the dad told me after looking at the letter, like just threw it at them and said, get out of here. And then the other, he said the woman came out of the box, walked all the way around almost in tears and hugged him and said, I'm so sorry that you have to do this. 2 very, very, very different experiences. Okay. So, is a letter something you'd recommend for travel within the US as well? Yeah. I mean, it's, Henry was on his way to Kansas City from Philadelphia, to watch the Eagles play. So yes, absolutely. Um, they have it folded in their, it's all been international so far. I haven't done it for domestic, but they like have it in their passport folded in with other things and they handed it over and they just kind of looked at it. But yeah, it's like part of what they're handing over. Haley, go ahead.
Just a follow up, and thanks for, kind of affirming my previous question. But I know this may be getting into employment law as well, so if you need more time, let me know. But um, one thing I know that you mentioned about who you work for. So this isn't a common occurrence, but we have international offices, and I may sometimes need to fly. And if at all I can, I would rather not leave the country for obvious reasons that we've talked about. Is there a way that I can protect myself and my employment? Because otherwise, this company protects me pretty well as a queer person. And I'd
Hmm.
like to stay employed with them if possible.
Hmm.
So, is there a way that I can, without causing drama or anything like that, be like, hey, if you guys need me to travel internationally, I would much rather not, if possible? Like, is there a letter that I can provide or something like that, or actions to take in advance?
Yeah. I mean, my answer is fairly, um, just a human-based answer, right? I would ask, um, if we were just like one-on-one consulting on this, I would say, I would ask you about your relationship with your direct supervisor, right? Like how close are you? Going to HR is more formal,
Mm,
but who decides that you have to go do that thing in Reykjavik, right? And can it be done remote post-COVID? I mean, nobody was traveling and everybody did business
yeah.
very well for over a year and a half without going anywhere, even though we used to fly to San Diego and back in the day for a lunch meeting, right? So again, with the nature of what you do, I don't know if that's possible, but so first and foremost, closest chain of command. There's nothing. It's a safety issue, right? And it's a personal safety issue. There are more countries now than ever. It's unprecedented offering asylum to LGBTQ folks. So it is not a secret that going abroad and trying to come back in and dealing with our very own border control is a concern for safety for LGBTQ folks. So while you would, I would probably look up some stats, like make it very simple, as if you had a one pager that a judge, that's all they were going to read, and they had to quote unquote decide on your case based on this one page. What would it say? Where you just feed your direct supervisor all the information they need to advocate for you because they probably answer to someone. Then it's more than just like, hey, I don't want to do that travel.
Yeah.
You know
Okay.
what I mean? But look at it as giving your boss the tools they need to advocate for you.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Anything else? I'll jump into some of these marriage questions and estate planning questions because there were a lot of good ones. So, good. Yep. All right. Good transition. So, one of the one that, again, there were 500 questions, but a lot of the questions we're not going to go over all 500. A lot of the questions were the same and just asked in a different way. Okay, so I went through them all and I was able to distill them down to about 50. And so it's very, 500 to 50, but the same type of questions means we all have the same things on our mind. We're just asking them in a slightly varied way. So if marriage equality is overturned, what happens to those of us who are married? Right? So that's like the number one. It was asked in very different ways multiple times. And, obviously I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. I'm not, but my thoughts are, so first and foremost, marriage being overturned is too simple of a statement. There are two aspects of marriage because there are 1,138 state and federal privileges tied to the institution of marriage. So there are two bodies of law, if you will, that will impact what happens to marriage equality. Everybody focuses on Obergefell. But there is also the Respect for Marriage Act. So how could they eviscerate or get around the Respect for Marriage Act, right? Which says we have full faith and credit. So even if Obergefell gets overturned and I live in Texas, if I was married in a state that recognizes it, Texas has to recognize it. That's the Respect for Marriage Act. So they do not have the numbers to overturn this. This is a statute. It became law days after Roe v. Wade was overturned, right? But 91 out of 100 senators voted for it. Do you think that many Republicans love us? No. It got massive bipartisan support because there were massive religious exemptions you could drive a car through. They were like, okay, Pelosi, Schumer, your people are freaking out. Abortion's gone. Clarence Thomas just said marriage equality needs to get revisited. Everybody's freaking out. We'll give you the Respect for Marriage Act because we don't care, because if it really push comes to shove, we'll use the massive religious exemptions that we require. That's why it was passed within days with almost unanimous bipartisan support. Okay. Second is what happened on Inauguration Day when he declared two sexes in this country, male and female. Obviously, the folks initially impacted by that were trans, gender diverse, non-binary folks, but I saw the writing on the wall for marriage. Wouldn't it stand to reason that if the federal government only recognizes two sexes, male and female, that all benefits that flow from the federal government will only flow to a marriage made up of a man and a woman? So I don't know how they get around and eviscerate or nullify the Respect for Marriage Act without repealing it, because they need 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. They have 52. But we know that they, even if they can't go the proper channels, they'll find a way. So there is nothing any of us will be able to do in the bluest of blue states, Colorado, California, New York. You can live in the bluest of blue states. There is nothing any of us will be able to do if they find a way around that. Like, if you remember what it was like to live during DOMA, the Defense Against Marriage Act. You could get married in New York, and the state of New York recognized you, but the federal government didn't. That was the Edie Windsor case before Obergefell. We've lived through this, but DOMA has been deemed unconstitutional by the Windsor case. This would be for religious reasons. Has never been litigated. So a new DOMA, if you will, but for a different reason, will need to be litigated again. They won't be able to rely on Windsor as precedent because it's a whole new reason why they're denying the federal benefits. And then the male-female piece. I don't know how they justify that. But so nothing any of us will be able to do with that. Then this is Obergefell. Obergefell is just the state. So if Obergefell gets overturned, like when Dobbs overturned Roe v. Wade, right, in Georgia, there's a ban against marriage equality. Sorry if you're from Georgia. I always pick on Georgia, and someone got offended last time. I love Atlanta. So there's a ban in Georgia, and Obergefell is in front of it. It's not there. It's still there. It just Obergefell said that was unconstitutional. So then if Obergefell gets overturned, immediately upon it being overturned, the ban will be back in effect. But then the Respect for Marriage Act says, even though that's there and Georgia gets to prevent me as a Georgian citizen from Georgia being able to get married in Georgia, I can go and get married in Colorado, come back, and Georgia has to recognize it. But Georgia doesn't have to allow marriages. So it's very nuanced. Now, the question was, what will happen to those marriages that already exist? So if we lose the federal benefits, there are a lot of lawyers who think they'll never do that because of the bureaucratic nightmare. Millions of people are filing their taxes and da-da-da. How do we unwind it? When we got marriage equality, they gave us 3 years where we could retroactively go back and amend our tax returns. I had a client who got $110,000, took a year off, went on vacation, and just traveled the world with their government money. Right? So they figured out that bureaucratic nightmare. So, but they liked us, that particular administration liked us, and so gave us that, if you will. But what I envision is if it does go away, something similar, future oriented, right? So if it went away today, and then they say it will go into effect, marriage, your rights, your federal rights inherent in marriage will sunset 12/31/26 or 1/17 or 27 rather, right? So you have this whole tax year, you have the following tax year, but then by 27, have your affairs in order, right? Like do the same thing but looking forward. And then obviously it'll depend on the state in which you live because there's states that have it codified into law, New Jersey, Delaware, Colorado, so it's never going away here. So it's a complicated, nuanced answer because people speak too generally with marriage overturned. It's multifaceted, okay? And we'll know more once Obergefell gets overturned because, again, we can't litigate. That's the other piece. We can't litigate the Respect for Marriage Act until Obergefell is overturned. It's the only time in U.S. history that a law was passed where there's no reason for it to be passed. Why do we need the Respect for Marriage Act? We have marriage nationwide per Obergefell. Yet 2 years ago, they passed a law, first time ever in history, in anticipation of Obergefell getting overturned, they passed a law. Right? So this gets overturned, then this kicks in and says, okay, Georgia, you don't want to allow same-sex marriages, fine, but Angela was married in Colorado, so you have to recognize her as married in Georgia. And then Georgia will say, no, we don't want that due to religious reasons, and then we'll litigate the Respect for Marriage Act. So it's just going to be a multifactorial thing. And we'll have more legal queer A's about it as things unfold. So should we marry now if we're not to protect our rights? Hillary Clinton was on the front of Time magazine saying the exact same thing. I am recommending, I mean, if you were already talking about it, right? Like, not if you just met someone, like lavender marriages back in the day, but if you were already talking about it and it was in the horizon, I would safely, with a prenup, get married now and hedge your bets that you will be able to maintain some of the 1,138 state and federal benefits. We don't know how or if they will go away if you're already married, per the first question. So if you are and you've hedged your bets and it's just nobody after will get the federal or whatever it ends up being, they draw a line in the sand so that there is no even bureaucratic. Everybody who's already filed gets to continue to file all the things, but nobody moving forward after 1/1/27 or whatever it is, right? So we don't know how. So yes, safely with a prenup. I've advocated prenups, right? The 9 essential documents, prenups the 10th or postnup. We've been watching straight people F up marriage for 400 years. What makes us think we're any different? Okay. Everybody has a prenup. Everybody has a prenup. It's whether or not you wrote it or the state in which you live in wrote it. But we're reading something if you get divorced, and the divorce code is meant for everyone in the state in which you live and therefore meant for no one. Right? That's why you don't see many people just sending like gifts to their divorce lawyers. Right? But and do you offer post-nups? Yeah, post-nups for sure. I've probably done more post-nups than prenups because of the hodgepodge way in which we've gotten marriage equality. I remember in 2015 when all of a sudden we got marriage equality and I had people calling me, they're like, so I'm married? And I'm like, yeah, you're married. Well, I would have gotten a prenup. And I'm like, you got married 8 years ago in P-Town. Like, what do you mean? It's just now legal, you know? And so they're like, well, I could have used some notice. And I'm like, sorry that you didn't get weeks and weeks of notice. You got married 8 years ago. And so I've done lots. So with that hodgepodge of getting the right Prop 8 and all the things, like post-nups are very common. Some states don't like them. I add whereas clauses explaining. There are also a lot of post-nups during COVID, not LGBTQ related, just like COVID, you know, it's like, oh my God, our wedding's tomorrow. Like a year just went by, like, you know, both glacially and super fast and all of the things. And so, like, in the whereas clause, why did you sign a prenup 4 days before your marriage? COVID. I forgot about it, you know? So yeah, so not all states favor it, but in some states really do. States want you to decide your own divorce code. And the other thing I tell folks is, you know, this is the first time you've played this, or maybe the first time you've played the game of marriage, right? But if you've never played the game of marriage before, even if you have with someone else, it's the first time you're playing the game of marriage with this person, right? And so if you're coming over to my house tonight for game night, what's the one thing, and we've never played this game, it's still shrink wrapped, we have to unwrap it and all the thing, what's the first thing we're going to do when we open up the game? Read the rule book. And you just get to put your rule book together yourself. I had a few months ago, they put something really cute, not enforceable, but I let it happen anyways because it was cute. And they initialed next to it knowing that it's not enforceable. But their happy place is P-Town. And so if one of them throws in the towel, they agree, even if it's February, to go to P-Town, their happy place, for a week, get everybody out of their ear, leave devices, and just sit and talk about how they got there. Right? So if one person doesn't want to go to P-Town, I can't force that person to go to P-Town, but hopefully when they revisit the document, they remember the intention with which they entered into the prenup with. So yes, long answer. I do recommend getting married safely with a prenup. Hedge your bets. How can estate planning protect our marriage if Obergefell is overturned or marriage rights are limited to certain states? So again, estate planning power, marriage privilege. Marriage 1,138 state and federal privileges. Only these documents give you power. They are complementary. And for decades, we've been using estate planning documents to create legal bonds between one another. The revocable living trust in particular is our marriage recreation tool. But at the end of the day, everybody needs these documents. I got passionate around this topic 20 years ago with the Terry Schiavo case. Straight married cis couple. He was not her healthcare power of attorney. She did not have an advance directive. He had no more power over his wife's body than the mother. She wanted her on life support. He said that's not what she wanted. They duked it out in litigation. She languished on life support for 15 years. You are not automatically these things for one another by virtue of marriage. I feel like 10 years ago, we got marriage equality, and as a community, we breathed in legitimacy for the first time, and we mistook that feeling for power. It was not. We stood bolder, we stood taller, but it was visibility and legitimacy. And now that that legitimacy is being ripped away violently, we're left sitting there going, we have no power. And there's a return to these documents when there never should have been a leaving of them. So they are complementary to one another. They do help us claw back some of those privileges. They do help us claw back some of the legal ties. Again, there is no power inherent in marriage, but when you're co-trustees, co-CEOs of one another's lives, and you have a joint repository, a joint bucket where you put all of your assets, there is nothing more powerful than that. Durable power of attorney. The document, that most powerful document while you're alive. You can literally do anything for your partner, as if your partner were personally present in the room in your sole discretion. Okay. Then there's a question later that I wanted to follow up. I don't know where it is exactly, but it asks, do we need these if we're unmarried? 100%. 100%, even more so. Now, again, when I say even more so, there are, of those 1,138 state and federal privileges, one of them is automatic visitation rights to your spouse, automatic probate avoidance upon the first of you to die. These are things we can claw back with the document. So why have we been using these documents for 50 years to recreate a marriage? Because we couldn't get married back then. But, in my married folks, right? Your average straight person gets the standard 5 documents. My clients have 9, right? And I think what a lot of estate planning attorneys that weren't LGBTQ or focusing on the LGBTQ community did incorrectly 10 years ago when we got marriage equality. They started treating married LGBTQ folks like straight married LGBTQ folks. I don't know how many estate planning attorneys go, what do you do different in your practice? What, a gay married couple is different than a straight married couple? Yeah, actually they are. You know, your marriage is considered legal in all 195 countries in this world. Mine, 37. I hop on a plane, I end up somewhere where I'm not legally married. Even things that straight people get a pass on, HIPAA, right? Something so, no, it's not so minute as HIPAA. It's, in my opinion, more important than having the power to make the decision, because if you can't get the information to make the decision, how do you make, right? You need to make an informed decision. So you could have the power of attorney. So many estate planning attorneys make them separate documents. The HIPAA waiver as a standalone and the healthcare power of attorney. I did too my first 3 years of practice because my mentor was a straight estate planning attorney, and that's what people do. And then my first 3 years in practice actually representing LGBTQ folks, I realized that our number one obstacle, number one challenge at a hospital is establishing our HIPAA status to one another. Man in a hospital bed, woman come running in crying. Ma'am, let me take you to your husband. No questions asked. Not who are you to the patient? Do we have a HIPAA waiver on file for you? No, there is a crying woman. Let's, please don't be rude. Take her to her husband. Assumed. Man in a hospital bed, man come running in crying. Skirt. What's your relationship to the patient? That's my husband. Prove it. Well, I don't have my marriage certificate on me, but it doesn't matter because I am the healthcare power of attorney. I'm not disputing that is a valid healthcare power of attorney, but I cannot violate Heath's HIPAA rights. I don't have a HIPAA waiver on file. I'm going to need Heath to wake up out of the coma to sign a HIPAA waiver. So it's not that I didn't give my clients a HIPAA waiver, it's that they were separate. And so my client, Angela always talks about power, power. I'm going to grab the power document, rush to the hospital, leave the one little paid HIPAA waiver at home. And then they'd have to come home, get that, go back. And so clearly I'm a slow learner. It took me 3 years, 7 couples, but then I just combined it. Okay. And in 14 years, no one has ever had an issue since. But little things like that estate planning attorneys, this travel card, right? Like they're always so baffled by this. Like, what is that even and why? Right? And it's like, well, we're only considered married again in 37 countries out of 195 that fly a flag. I have clients leaving today for Italy, super homophobic in the last 5 to 7 years. Right? It's just a contract. That's why it's enforceable everywhere. It's a contract. I, Angela, allow so-and-so to visit me in a hospital. If you are somewhere with privacy laws, there's a HIPAA. So you're allowed in the room. They have to talk to you, but you have no power. And then you go down and you pull the power document from the cloud and you're good to go. Right? So all to say, unmarried folks need this even more because you have none of the built-in privileges, automatic visitation rights, probate avoidance, all of the things. So for those folks, but what made me very well positioned for this moment in time for LGBTQ folks is 10 years ago when we got marriage equality, I didn't treat you as married. For the last 17 years, I've continued to look at all of my married couples as unmarried because I view you predominantly, statistically, on the whole in this world as unmarried. Because you are. We just didn't expect it to be taken away here, to go from 37 to 36 in this country. But again, these travel cards, when Obergefell gets overturned, or, I was at a conference in Miami and the state of Florida. And then you have a layover in Atlanta in the state of Georgia, right? So in one day being in both Georgia, Florida, so it will, all of these documents are helpful. This has come up a lot because of how under the desk news, one of the things they said, and so people have been confused about this. So I wanted to address this with as many people as possible. Where do we file them? Do they need to be filed, and if so, where? And so V had mentioned filing. You don't actually file these documents anywhere, with a courthouse or anything. These are your estate planning documents. They are your, they're meant to be easily accessible. Okay, but there's not a courthouse. The only time in 17 years, twice, that I've filed either a power of attorney or a will was in a very, very, very hostile family situation. Okay, because once you file a will, you can't, if you want to edit it and or a trust, and trusts are confidential, so no register of wills will take your trust ultimately, because you can't file that. It's confidential. Nobody's allowed to see that. And so in a very, very hostile family situation, if you file the will that says, I leave everything to Jenny, and they're mad about it because they're homophobic and they've disowned me, then once I file the will with the Register of Wills, I then send notice to everyone, if I weren't leaving everything to Jenny, who could take under the laws of intestacy. And so that would be children if I had any, parents if they were alive, siblings, everybody has to get a notice that I filed the will. And then 30 days later, a hearing is set. And if they want to challenge my capacity, they have to do so while I'm alive. It's amazing. I mean, it's super, super powerful because you stand there in court with a judge and the homophobic parent. And then the judge says, this will is valid. Angela is clearly of sound mind. She wants to leave everything to Jenny. And now that will can never be contested. 47% of LGBTQ wills are contested. Another reason to get a revocable trust. Okay? If your relationship is like a castle, the revocable trust is a moat around your castle. Okay? I could keep going, but since we're coming up on the hour, why don't I take questions from you? Will the travel doc? Yes. So I asked Tom. Tom's awesome. I just asked Tom something, and then it always happens, and earlier than anticipated. We've gotten a lot of feedback that folks, we have our estate planning documents, we have the revocable trust, we have we have it, but we don't have that hospital visitation form. So it is now available on Pride plans as a standalone, only $45 for the couple. So you'll get both, not each, and you'll see it in the healthcare section on the front page. All right, on the landing page. So yes, those are available as standalones moving forward. And when you're going to get the document, you're going to get this. You're going to get the full piece of paper, and then we've given you the dimensions. We take ours to Staples. So everyone who comes in physically to do their signing, we then email them to Staples. They know my dimensions, and then once a month we go and pick up everybody's cards, and then we mail them to them. So we gave you those dimensions, and so you'll be able to get it laminated and shrunken down to the passport type size. Okay, I used to make them smaller than this pre-marriage equality 10 years ago. I made them smaller because they were meant for wallets. And then post-marriage equality, I made them a little bit bigger, easier to read because they're just meant to go on your passports. So depending on what happens in the future, I may shrink them down and make them even more manageable. But again, on your phone is everything, right? Our Vax cards, they take phone for everything. All right. Any other questions? Your own. All right, well, I'll touch on this one, Jen, if you don't see one. How can we make sure that spouse designation wouldn't be overturned if marriage is overturned? Very good question. So there was a lot of discourse, a lot of dialogue between attorneys on removing the mention of spouse. And I was very opposed to that. I was in agreement with removing the genderized version, wife, wife, husband, husband. But I really wanted to keep spouse because that is what you are, right? And so I created a definition. It's more of an affirmation of spousal definition that I put in all of my documents except for this one. I never mentioned who you were to one another in this one because you could be somewhere where it's illegal to be LGBTQ. So I don't want to out you by virtue of this card. Okay, so this is the one document that just says, I, Angela, so and so. But the spousal definition. So when it talks about the two areas of law, the statutory reversal of marriage, the decisional law reversal of marriage, that as of the date of the signing of the document, the laws in effect, you are spouses as of that day, irrespective of any changes in statutory or decisional law. And then it goes on to say that the term spouse is merely a designator meant to reflect and affirm our committed marital relationship, right? What if I said the human Jen Posick? I appoint the human Jen. I appoint the a-hole Jen. I appoint, right? It's just a designator meant to qualify further the name. But at the end of the day, I've appointed Jen Posick. So why would the fact that I've named them as spouse in any way challenge that authority? And so then I go on to say, and for the purposes of this document, I, reiterate that I am granting this power to Jen, each of the documents. So if we're unmarried now but married soon, our estate planning docs. I missed it. We need to be updated. You don't have to. There are a lot of people. Your marriage certificate will say that you're married. For clients that I work with, I do a complimentary update and just, update it, change domestic partner to spouse and add the definition. But at the end of the day, your marriage certificate proves that you're spouses. And so I am of the mindset, get the documents now. The documents matter more, right? Again, versus the marital relationship. They matter more. They provide the power. They provide the protections. The marriage provides the privilege, right? So if at some point in the next few years you have something that's actually update worthy, right, then that's a good time to update something like that. But it's not update worthy in and of itself, in my opinion. And Tom mentioned this the other day, but I don't know when we're going to be able to do it, but it is high on our list of things to do, is to create a mechanism by which you can update the documents yourself moving forward every day. I have this one old guy, the hospital visitation authorization form, the one where you put your chosen family. He's got like 79 people on it, and every Christmas he edits it. He's like, "You're out," and I feel like he should just have like, an amount that he paid. Like I just know every January or February I'm going to hear from Herb, and someone else is out. But so if you wanted to change your documents every month, every day, once a year, that when you go through Pride plans, you pay X amount a year and you have the ability to update your documents at all times. You move to another state. Oh, that was another question, very important. If you move to another state, the two documents that you absolutely must keep updated are the will and the trust. So your last will and testament, your revocable trust. Zoom has made me very prop focused, even though it means nothing to you. This is your last will and testament, and it's a pour over will, which is why I like the visual of water. So you'll have pour over wills that pour into your trust. So the whole point of this, from an estate planning perspective, not LGBTQ perspective, but the point from estate planning is probate avoidance, right? So the revocable trust, everything inside of it avoids probate. Maybe we'll talk about that at one of these legal Q&As, just probate. Stacey, I got you. Yep. And then, but you have to go through probate in the state in which you die and the state in which your documents are governed. Because we have to let that state know, right? We can't take an Illinois will and send it to a Kentucky court. So you've gone from the goal of 0 probate, but now you've given yourself double probate in 2 states. The state in which you died, because you technically didn't die with any Illinois documents or Kentucky, whatever I said, but Kentucky, Illinois. So now you have 2 when the goal was 0. Okay, so those 2 documents absolutely need to be updated. Then the other documents will depend on the state you're coming from and the state you're going to and the statutes. So I just tell my folks, reach out, let me know where you're moving, and I'll tell you if there's anything else. But no matter what, those 2. Stacey, go ahead.
Thank you. I have 2 questions on the actual plan.
Only one.
Okay, just one.
I'm kidding.
The first question is that currently on our home, only one of us is on the deed. And so my question is, do we have to get both of our names on the deed before we then pour it into the trust, or will the trust just take care of that? Because we'll have to do that with the county again with the trust. Okay, that's the first question.
Okay, go with the second one.
And the second question is, we were doing the paperwork and the last will and testament joint contingent beneficiaries. I got a little confused because it asked for names and percentages. And I basically, we're leaving everything to each other. And then when we're both gone, we're saying who gets the cars, the house, the cash, the this. And so I didn't know what the percentage was about. I got confused. I didn't know where we list what they actually get. That's it.
Right. Okay. So let me start with the first one because it's quicker. So yes, you will be able to just do one deed. You'll get a twofer, right? Okay. So by virtue of the marriage certificate and the trust certificate, that will prove to them that, okay, only one person's on the deed, and now it's going into the joint revocable living trust of the 2 of you. The only thing I will say is if there's a mortgage on it, okay. So when there is a mortgage, you can still do it. But whereas I don't care about folks, if they're both on the deed and both on the mortgage, nobody cares.
Right.
But if one's on the deed and one's on the mortgage, and that you've just tinkered with ownership, title, right? And so just making sure that the mortgage company knows that you're doing it. It's only a transfer by way of A, revocable trust, and B, by virtue of your marriage. So they will approve it, but I don't want, after the fact, all of a sudden you get a letter saying that triggered the mortgage acceleration clause and now your entire mortgage is due next month, right? Like, so that would be the result. I mean, it's never happened, but it's just, it's CYA. All right, the second is, I always tell folks, imagine And what's your wife's name or partner's name?
Maggie. Sorry, Maggie.
Maggie. Okay. So first and foremost, when people are trying to come up with the percentages, I always say don't get mired down in what makes up what you have. This account, that account, the cars, cash, da da da. Don't think about that. We can work backwards. But if you sat there and you had 100% of what you owned, whether it was $1 or $1 million and comprising of 17 different types of assets or two assets, if you had $1, how would you whack that up? And those are your percentages. Now they're called joint contingent because you both agree on them. So, Stacy, sorry, I'm going to kill you off since you asked the question. Sorry about it, Maggie. You get to live. So, Stacy has 100% of what Stacy owns, and dies, and Maggie has 100% of what Maggie owns right now, plus 100% of what she inherited from Stacy. So, Maggie now has 200%. Right? So you got 100% and then 200%. All right. So then if I met Stacy as a single solo person in the world, Maggie doesn't exist, Stacy, and you died tomorrow, who would you want to get your stuff? Okay. So I'm going to pretend that it's your sister and her two kids. Then I talk to Maggie and I say, Maggie, you're a single solo person in the world. Stacy doesn't exist. You die tomorrow. Who do you want to inherit everything that you have? And you say your bonus daughter, that, one person, everything to my bonus daughter. So we have 3 people here, 1 person here. But Stacy died and everything went to Maggie. Maggie lived another 7 years with 200% of the assets. Bonus daughter gets everything, and Stacy's sister and niece and nephew got disinherited by the pure unfortunate fact that she died first. So we do joint contingent beneficiaries where bonus daughter comes over here and the sister and niece and nephew come over there. Then, as far as whacking up percentages, some folks will say 50% to bonus daughter, 16 to my sister, 16 to my niece, 16 to my nephew, adding up to 100. Others who've been together forever and have bought and sold multiple homes and their money has been like put in the washing machine, rinse, repeat, recycle. They're like, I don't even know whose money is what anymore. 25, 25, 25, 25. You can decide the percentages based on that, but they are joint contingent, meaning you agree upon them. And this is called a sweetheart disposition will, where the person who dies first, their family's not penalized because their person died first. Okay? All right. You're welcome. All right. So I think for the next one, I mean, there's so many good questions. The difference between revocable and irrevocable trust. If adoption rights are reversed, if marriage equality is reversed, would adoption rights be reversed? Should I update my child's federal documents, name and gender, now or wait? How long does the process take, and can these documents be revoked? Are these documents valid nationwide? What about internationally? How do we avoid probate and make sure assets pass smoothly to a partner? What happens if both spouses are on the title but only one on the mortgage? Similar to yours. Do trusts really protect assets? How do we protect assets from unsupported family members? So there's still a lot of good questions. And so maybe at the next one, we'll do half and half, kind of like what we did today, and then go from there. All right. All right. You guys rock.
Wait, quick
as
question.
always. Oh, Jen.
If
Yeah.
somebody wants to do a post-nup through you, how do they do a consultation for that? Would it be the same
What state?
planning? Haley, what state?
Double muted. Sorry, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island is Erica. So I will reach out to my co-counsel with that. Prenups, postnups are so state specific with law that while I can do estate planning for folks in Rhode Island, I would want you to work directly with my co-counsel, Erica, who's licensed in Rhode Island, who may know more of the nuanced things for a postnup.
Perfect.
So I do all the estate planning, but I refer back to my co-counsel adoptions, name changes, prenups, postnups, things that require filings because I can't file in the state, or something super nuanced, like you want this to be enforceable 11 years from now if you get divorced.
Hmm.
And so I don't want to be responsible for not knowing like one thing that would have made it enforceable in Rhode Island that doesn't exist in my state. New Jersey and Pennsylvania, I'm licensed in both, night and day. Night and day, you know? So I'll reach out to Erica, and then will you make a note, Jen, so that we remember? And if you want to email me, Haley, so I have your direct contact.
Cool. Can do.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. You guys rock. Happy Tuesday. They're better than Tuesdays. I'll see you in a couple weeks. All right. Bye, guys.